This podcast includes explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. This episode, The Conservative Manifesto, consists of 2 parts. The first part, The Great British Firewall, is what you're listening to now. Enjoy. And keep tuned for the second part, Porn Will Tear Us Apart, which will be released on June 1st. The Earthist Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Earthist Podcast. For this episode, we got something special for you. In case at this point you thought we're just some sex fanatics rambling about our perverted fantasies. You're right. But we're also more than that. Last month we went on a journalistic adventure to London town to figure out the status of pornography in society, the new censorship laws that are being passed in the UK and the US, what consequences they're going to have for everyone, how, while governments and institutions are arguing for censorship, for protecting children and women from harm and trafficking, this could be the beginning of the end of freedom of speech in the internet, and generally, the start of an unprecedented control in democratic countries by the state and the major corporations. 1984 is here, mates.
It's up there with Chinese democracy.
We really felt like that there was a kind of gap in the canon that was sort of, I'm going to use the phrase, aching to be filled.
Keep in mind that it has face sitting in it. It's great. I at no point felt like I was going to choke and die.
Data privacy is one of the biggest issues of the 21st century.
And now they're looking at having a monopoly on access and literally becoming the gatekeepers to online porn.
Take back control of our money, our borders and our laws.
Because it's creating the Great British Firewall, or Hadrian's Firewall as it's been called.
So actually, all of this started with a trip to London.
So, thank you so much for coming up.
We basically just wanted to have a girls' night out at the Porn Film Festival London, didn't we?
Yeah, in all honesty, yeah.
Any excuse for sex.
Okay, so we really had a very important mission in London, which was having a super ecstatic 4 days of watching porn all together.
Talking about porn.
Meeting porn people.
Drinking with porn people. Dancing.
Being in bodily fluids. You know, the normal stuff.
Rejoicing in all the porn stuff.
Sexing.
Drinking lots of tea with sexy people.
Having fish and chips.
While watching porn.
Yeah, it was really fun.
It was a really nice girls' trip.
And we got a kick-ass apartment in central London.
Yeah, which had like 10 different light settings.
3 bedrooms.
And really bad neighbours. We got a complaint.
What were your favourite bits?
Seeing Lena in action was probably one of
Over
my
and over again.
Yeah, that was great. In many different characters as well. And
How many films did you think we watched?
oh my god, 18 hours of it.
Hundreds.
It was like 4 days straight, like at least 3 screenings every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, I lost count after the first screening. Like,
And one screening is 2 hours. So you can just imagine, like, you watch porn maybe on the regular for like 15 minutes to get off. We're watching it for 2 hours times 3, 6 hours of porn a day. Like,
that sounds like 6 hours straight of masturbation.
It's like a real mental workout.
like even in a honeymoon stage of a relationship, you don't fuck that much, you know? Like, well,
Now go figure the size of our biceps now.
But not everybody in the UK is enjoying their pornography, and access to porn is changing in a big way. And this is how we came to solve the mystery of the Great British Firewall. Dun, 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 dun.
That sounds like shit.
Okay, let's take it one point at a time, yeah? So, as we all know by now, the UK is going through some political changes, with Theresa May wanting to Brexit the EU and make
A plan for a stronger, fairer, more prosperous Britain.
They've called this plan the Conservative Manifesto, and they've defined 5 giant challenges Britain faces today. Apart from addressing economy and social issues, one of those giants is the internet, and how to gain control over it.
It should be as hard for children to access violent and degrading pornography online as it is in the high street.
Well, actually, that was Liliana Velázquez, not Theresa May talking. For some reason, we couldn't get hold of Theresa.
She didn't want to be part of this podcast.
She's busy.
Interesting.
So I'm in my 30s. I remember a time before the internet. And I remember when I was, kind of like 12, 13, 14 years old, the difficulty of getting hold of pornography. And when I say pornography, I'm talking like magazines. Or, I'm talking about page 3 from The Sun. And holidays, for me, abroad, particularly France, would be brilliant because everybody always knew that the continent is where the proper porn is. I have these, kind of very, very fond memories of, I'd be on holiday with my family and we'd be let loose in a town somewhere for half an hour. So we'll meet you back at the car. And I would immediately head to a newsagent's and kind of have spend whatever pocket money I had buying as many porn magazines as I could and stuffing them under my t-shirts.
That was the adorable pornographer Charlie Forrest reminiscing on his early quest for porn. He's right, we no longer need to go on holiday to access that really juicy porn. We can just go online. The internet has changed everything. Acting as a home of free expression for many of us and a big business for others, the World Wide Web has been a free-for-all for some time now. But the government is keen to take back control, and like most systems of control, it claims to be doing this to protect society's most vulnerable, in this case, the children. There is so much pornography online. 36% of the internet and 1/3 of all online searches, according to the BBC, the Big Black Cock. The BBC? The Big Black Cock?
No, Pandora. The BBC is the British Broadcasting Company. Corporation.
Oh, God. I'm just not with it.
Exactly. Kids are just 2 clicks away from watching extreme, brutalizing images, like double anal fisting online. Porn is degrading and objectifying women. Young boys are going to demand from girls what they're watched in porn. They will think anal sex is normal. They're going to watch simulated rape and think that means rape is okay. Porn is a lot like drugs. They will seek out more and more hardcore porn and will become completely desensitized to sex and have totally warped and wiped a view of sexuality. Studies from the NSPCC have found that half of all children have watched porn online, including a quarter of 11-year-olds. Researchers are warning that it's stripping children of their childhoods.
The survey played a big role in creating moral panic around online pornography, but surveys are often unreliable. People don't always answer truthfully to try and come across well, or they incline to answer in a way that they think that interviewers expect. The NSPCC, another one? What is the NSPCC?
I really know this one. That's the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children.
Needs a better name, has a history of flawed research techniques. In this particular survey, parents were also present when the children were questioned about watching porn. So you can imagine how reliable those answers were.
It's this idea that this kind of they've manufactured this problem of young kids, 8-year-old kids, accidentally looking at porn, which is based on these really dodgy statistics. There was this NSPCC survey which found that a quarter of 18 to 15-year-olds accidentally stumbled on porn and were upset by it. And it's like, if your mum asks you, like, how did you find this porn? Are you going to say, like, oh, I Googled for gangbang because I was horny? Or are you going to say, oh no, I don't know how I clicked on that. I accidentally, like, I just stumbled on it.
Even if these surveys were not reliable, the internet has made it really easy for young people to access all kind of pornographic content. Porn has come a long way from the glossy pages of the magazine. The internet, especially the tube sites that have made porn so freely available, have done a lot to change not only how accessible porn is, but also porn itself. We wanted to learn more about how things have changed, so we went all the way to San Fernando Valley via Skype to talk to someone with a very special insight into the industry.
My name is Holly Randall, and I am an erotic photographer, director, and producer. I've been working in the industry for almost 20 years. My mother is Suze Randall, who is considered by many to be a pioneer for women in the adult industry. So I grew up in, I guess you could say, kind of in the adult industry, around it. So it's kind of always been a part of my life and my family life, and it's my job now. And
Suze Randall was indeed pioneering in the world of erotic photography, the first female star photographer for both Playboy and Hustler. She was also one of the early female pornographic directors and now president of one of the world's biggest adult websites, Suze.net. So, we've been talking about the dangers of being exposed to pornography early on. What was it like for Holly to actually grow up around it?
I had a very normal childhood, and my parents are still together 50 years later. My family and I are all very close. We went to good schools. I rode horses my whole life. I have two siblings. Neither of them are in the adult industry. One works in law, one works in the medical field. We had just a super normal childhood. We just had parents who had a job that was kind of unusual, but the way that they explained it to us when we were kids was they never hid what they did from us, but they just basically were mom and dad, I don't know, take pictures for adults, and this stuff is not for children. And so therefore you're not allowed to come into the office, and that's kind of what it is. It's there's lots of things that are inappropriate for children, like horror movies. So it was kind of just it wasn't a big deal, and especially when I was younger and I didn't understand what sex was. So when I got older and I started to hit puberty, then I became more interested, and I started stealing magazines from the office that my mom had shot.
So how did literally growing up around pornography affect Holly's own attitude to sex and sexuality?
My parents are wonderful parents and role models, and I grew up with a very open idea of sex and sexuality, no shame about the human body. My mom used to always say the female body is the most beautiful thing on earth, and I don't know, I wasn't raised with any shame around sex.
Growing up around pornography sounds pretty wholesome actually, but Holly's talking about the golden era of Playboy and porn in print and VHS, which is those cassette tapes that you used to put in and play videos if you don't know what they are. Growing up around online porn is a bit different, isn't it?
To be fair, I do think porn's a little too prolific on the internet. It's crazy how, anybody can access it. I mean, I used to steal my parents' magazines when I was a kid, and I had more access to porn than anybody when I was 8, you know what I mean? But what I had access to was nothing compared to what kids have access to now. But if I was a parent, which I am not, but if I was a parent, I would be concerned about, my kid being able to see all kinds of crazy shit online. And even if I put parental controls on my computers, I mean, everyone's got phones in their hands. Kids go out to their friends' houses. I mean, I remember being a kid. Kids are resourceful. It would concern me, but I think, this definitely brings up the consideration that we need to start talking to our kids about sex and not letting the internet teach our children about sex.
We're wondering if people were a bit more open to pornography that comes in more glamorous, soft packaging with a backstory. Oh, I love backstories. We'll talk more about this in part 2, but it seems to be important to porn regulators and anti-porn folk that pornography be just part of our lives in the same way as sex should be part of a more traditional structure like marriage, not a free-reigning pleasure, hardcore pursuit, certainly not something that would go as far to make hardcore sex seem normal. Filled with bucket loads of hardcore porn, the internet literally represents the opposite of that ideal. We asked Holly how the internet has changed the kind of porn that gets made.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, things have changed a lot. Back when I started working for my parents in like 1999, or early 2000, no, late 1999, I think is when I started working for my parents. We launched our website a month before Google launched. So back then, I mean, it was incredible. It was this whole other platform to sell your content on. And, we were doing really well and a lot of other people were doing really well. And then, the market just started getting flooded with free porn. I mean, there was always piracy. And we were always dealing with that. But, you had to be like kind of savvy to know how to get onto a file sharing site and, download illegally shared files. I don't even know how the fuck to do that. So, but, when the tube sites started popping up, you could just easily now just press play on any video. So it's changed everything dramatically. And my budgets have been cut by, half more, depending on the case. And, now when I used to have all day to shoot one scene, I have to shoot 2 scenes, 3 scenes. It's crazy. And it just feels rushed a lot of the time. And it just feels like there's just factory just pumping stuff out sometimes.
Yup, it's a factory, which means the chances of kids finding this explicit content are pretty high, right? We talked to another industry professional and parent to find out what he thinks about porn being so easy for kids to stumble across online.
My name is Justin Santos and I run Joy Bear Pictures. My daughter, if I let her use my phone for long enough, can find pornographic content on my phone very, very quickly. For me, it's kind of natural that we will need to verify who we are or age. Yeah. But just the simple procedure of just saying, I'm over 18, I can watch this.
Justin thinks children should be exposed to adult content progressively, in the same way as you start off with a certificate PG films and eventually move on to the 18 restricted.
That's why we don't open clubs to 10-year-olds. That's why, if you want to buy alcohol, you need to look at certain... And to me, porn is like the last thing to kind of fall in line. And I think it is important, that actually there are some measures in place just to make sure that it's going to the right people. I'm not playing a role in saying what stipulates obscene porn or not, or I'm just saying if you want to watch pornography, I need to know you're 18. I think that's a good thing. I think the message needs to be the same in pornography. Naturally, until you are 18, this isn't for you. It just isn't really. You shouldn't be watching it in the same respect that you shouldn't really be watching films where people are being shot or hurt. And obviously, you can the explicitness of that violence gets more as the kid gets older, until there comes a point where, okay, you can see this. Mm-hmm. And in some respects, it starts, in a cartoon with 2 people kissing each other, just a kiss. And then maybe on a PG-13, we see a thing come off the shoulder. And then in a 15, these are UK ratings, we see some boobs, whatever. And then 18, as I've already said, that's what you can see. And then bang, you're in. But there's been a progression there, whereas at the moment, there's no progression. You're in to the club straight away.
Okay, so we can see why people are concerned about pornography. So what is the government going to do, ladies?
Justin is right. An underage person can't buy a porn DVD, cigarettes, or alcohol, and the government wants to put the same boundaries in place online as offline. So they're putting up an age verification gateway to stop these minors from watching any adult content. This is all part of the sweet promise of the Conservative government's Digital Economy Act. As serious journalistic investigators, we decided we need to speak to a lawyer. So we called in Miles Jackman, the one and only obscenity lawyer. Yeah, so you're an obscenity lawyer. Is that how you would describe it officially, or?
Well, I am an obscenity lawyer and I invented my own job.
Right.
And that just seemed like the most appropriate title to give myself. I did think about porn lawyer, but I thought that was a bit too controversial. So the idea of obscenity, that there is this subjective, moralising notion that certain activities are acceptable and others are not, seemed to fit that brief very effectively. But in essence, I was a lawyer, I'm interested in alternative sexuality, and I am interested in the moving image. So I essentially triangulated all three so that I could create my own job.
I'm just going to ask you to explain the law change in the UK. So the Digital Economy Act, what's the deal with that?
So the Digital Economy Act 2018 deals with a number of different things that have relevance to sex work, pornography and consumption of it, as well as a few other bits and pieces which are non-sex work specific, like 10-year sentences for file sharing. But with regards to the sex industry stuff, it was a pledge in the British Conservative Party's manifesto that they would bring in age verification for pornography in order to stop those under 18 looking at it. Now, on face value, this may seem a very sensible decision to protect children, but in essence what it brings is the idea that any adult sexual material must be behind age verification.
So the system sounds reasonable, doesn't it? But not everybody thinks so, and people, including Miles, have actually been campaigning against this law. One of the most vocal activists comes from the industry itself, and after the workshop they held at the London Porn Film Festival on how to make your own DIY porn, they came to meet us for a chat.
My name's Blake, also known as Pandora Blake. That's the name I've done most of my porn work under for the last, 12 years that I've been working in porn. But I came out as non-binary last year, and I'm preferring Blake as a more gender-neutral option, but I still answer to either. And I am a kinky queer porn maker from London in the UK.
We've heard about this law coming into place that will create an online barrier to stop children from accidentally accessing adult content. But how is it actually going to work?
So the Digital Economy Act, and specifically its policy on age verification, is about stopping young kids under 18 from looking at porn. And so the way they're going to do this is by making anybody who wants to look at any porn online in the UK prove that they're over 18 somehow. So the government doesn't really say how you're meant to do this. They're letting the market sort that out because capitalism will make it fair, right? Like, that's how it works. And this is really problematic because most of the ways that people can prove that they're over 18 is by submitting some ID. You know, your passport, your driving license, your credit card, maybe your mobile phone contract, your proof of your national insurance or something like that. And so there's immediately massive privacy problems where people's personal data and what they look up for porn is connected, and no one wants that information to be collected in a database and leaked into the public domain. But the government have very responsibly or irresponsibly decided that this isn't their problem, and so there's nothing in the law about privacy. It doesn't mention privacy once. It doesn't mention security either, apart from in the sense of national security, but surely getting people into the habit of sharing private details online and entering their sensitive data is a massive national security risk.
Okay, so many of us have deleted Facebook, right?
Nope. No.
Okay, well, or we know people that have because of the whole Cambridge Analytica data scandal. It made most of us more aware of our lack of privacy online. And of course, this law change came about before Mark Zuckerberg tried to explain to a judge just why he doesn't want to share his hotel details, but he's quite happy to take that data and more from his Facebook users. Now that we've had a bit of a wake-up call on this, it seems crazy that the UK would want to encourage us to hand out our details online and just totally forget about security. So who's going to get all this data? Who's Theresa May going to call to make porn as inaccessible to children as a bottle of Calpol?
Well, there's a bunch of companies that have come up with their own age verification solutions, but it's looking like one company is going to dominate the market. The company that already dominates the market in pornography is MindGeek, which some of your listeners may not have heard of, but they probably will have heard of some of the websites that they own. So MindGeek own Pornhub, they own YouPorn, they own RedTube, amongst the free tube sites. They also own Brazzers, Digital Playground, and basically they're like the kind of already kind of like the Facebook or Google of pornography. Now they've been in touch with the government right from day one when it became clear that the government was gonna bring in age verification. They very cannily decided this isn't something that they're going to be able to fight against. So the best thing for them to do is to be on the inside track.
So the government is against pornography, but it's negotiating the age verification system with the biggest, most unethical porn company there is, MindGeek. Nice. So why is this not the best idea?
So they're going to have a monopoly on like being the preferred option, I think, because they already are the most visited porn sites. And they have a terrible record of security. Like every year for the last 5 years, their data has been breached and leaked and hacked. Like they just suck at keeping data secure. And Age ID, it's not like a zero knowledge proof where you've got a new generated hash token each time that's like encrypted and super secure. No. It's going to be your email address and a password, right? Which they are then potentially going to be able to connect to all of your porn browsing habits because they make their money from advertising. So they have a profit motive to collect details of what people look at and what they click on and what they bother age verifying to look at. That gives them really valuable data on what people like, and then they can produce more targeted advertising. So we're looking at a situation where the biggest porn company in the world, who are anticipating age verifying 25 million people in the first month, that's a quarter of the UK population, I think, are then going to have 25 million people's personal, sensitive, what they like to wank over information stored with the username and password that could identify them. And they're claiming that this isn't a privacy risk, even though they've been hacked every year for the last 5 years, and we've had exactly these details, email addresses and passwords, released into the public domain by hackers just to prove that, it's incredibly ripe.
So, getting the impression that MindGeek are not exactly the best information keepers.
They have got an extremely poor history of data security. So they've been hacked and breached and otherwise compromised on at least 3 major occasions. And as we've seen with the current Cambridge Analytica crisis, data privacy is a really strong, important issue. It's one of the biggest issues of the 21st century, which arises through technology. Can people trust age verification suppliers to keep their private sexual proclivities secure? And the short answer is, at the moment, no. And that's very concerning.
Why is it being sort of put into the hands of these sort of monopolised companies to control these things? Why would the government go to MindGeek?
Because they wouldn't have to pay any money. It's seen as a very simple policy that has a virtually nil cost effect. So at the best, they're paying out $5 million to the BBFC, which is the British Board of Film Classification, or censorship as it originally was, who have been designated as the regulator who will have to ensure that age verification is overseen appropriately. Unfortunately, the BBFC have not been given any powers to ensure that privacy and security are enshrined by the age verification solutions. So they are currently relying on what we call GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Rules from Europe that come in May, and they are saying that that will be sufficient to protect people's data. However, GDPR is like CCTV, as in CCTV cameras. CCTV cameras don't stop crime. They occasionally capture it so that once it has happened, the perpetrators may be identified, but it doesn't stop the initial crime from occurring. Likewise, GDPR will not stop data breaches. It will merely provide a way of punishing the people who've allowed them to occur. But after people's private sexual details are leaked into the public domain, like the Ashley Madison hack,
Exactly.
people are going to kill themselves, and that's not going to really be much of a suck when GDPR is considered to be the mechanism by which people are protected. So when private citizens' personal sexual details are leaked into the public domain, this is a huge breach of privacy, which we're seeing increasingly through digital mechanisms, from revenge porn, through to just sexual preferences being leaked, and also the possibility that people may be, like Ashley Madison, having illicit affairs, but that's their private business and shouldn't be in the public domain, less so because the government have mandated it.
Great. So in trying to protect kids, it sounds like we've totally forgotten to protect adults, who also stand to lose a lot from accessing pornography. But never mind about the data being leaked or lost. What can these big, hungry online giants like MindGeek do with all the wank data and more that we're handing over to them?
Okay, so let's talk about monopolies. We have Facebook, we have Amazon, Google, and since we're talking about mirroring our offline and online lives, an offline monopoly will look a bit like one company owning all the supermarkets in your town. Not only does that mean the shop can choose to sell only its own brand of shitty products, it could also decide to triple the prices in their shitty products. And you have to go there. You have absolutely no choice. And no choice is bad for competition, which we really need in commerce. And as we've seen with fake news, it can also be used to decide what we can see and what we can't see. And then it becomes a tool for modern propaganda and becomes a threat to democracy. It's not a democracy if one powerful man, let's call him the Mark Zuckerberg of porn, has control over everything. In politics, actually, that's called a dictatorship. So how does MindGeek, the monopoly of pornography, gets the control and again the monopoly over the age verification system? What are the consequences for indie porn producers?
So in practice, it's going to be super problematic in a number of ways. Firstly, some of the systems that are going to be available are free, but some of them aren't. And a lot of people will be kind of driven by what their viewers want to use. So you might end up in a position where in order to keep any of your customers, you have to have one of the ones you pay for, and that means you might not be able to afford to keep your site open. Because let's say you make 10 sales a day on your tiny porn website, but in order to get those 10 sales, you have like 10,000 viewers, then you have to age verify the 10,000. If you want to have any previews or promo or tour or anything, which you need if you want to make sales, and no one can afford to pay for 10,000 age verifications in order to make 10 sales. Like, the economics of it is just like you're spending 100 times more than you're getting. So for most niche sites like queer, feminist, indie, fetish, you just can't afford it. Then there's the problem that one of the options which they're now saying is going to be free is produced by MindGeek, who own the Tube sites. They're the biggest porn company in the world. They have a monopoly on distribution via the Tube sites, most of which non-consensually pirated and presented in a way that is contrary to the wishes of the performers and the producers, using slurs and offensive language. And they also have a monopoly on production because they own sites like Brazzers, the fake taxi empire, all of that, like very heteronormative, very mainstream pornography. And now they're looking at having a monopoly on access and literally becoming the gatekeepers to online porn, because their system that they've developed, which they're calling Age ID, they're going to use it on all of their sites. And they're also kindly going to let anyone else who wants to use it on their site. So let's say I'm a viewer, Joe Blogs, and I want to go and look at Pornhub. And so in order to look at Pornhub, I need to use Age ID because that's the only system they offer. So I create an Age ID login. And then I decide, I really like that site. I'm going to go and look at Paolita's site. And I go in, you've got this like, you could use this age verification option, or you could use your Pornhub login. I'm going to use my Pornhub login because it's like I've already got it. I don't want to have to resubmit my ID. I just want to be able to like enter my details and get in and look at the porn. So they're going to have a monopoly on like being the preferred option.
So what is the actual cost of the age verification system?
If you're doing it via mobile phone, it costs like 10p per check. If you're doing it via like your credit card rating, it can cost as much as like £1.50 a check. So if you've got like 1 million views a day, like you could be paying £1 million a day to do age checks. Like it's if you want to like age verify all your views.
That's absolutely insane. If you're an independent porn producer, there is no way on earth in which you can make more than £1 million a day for people watching your porn. Not only lawyers and porn producers are concerned about these issues, some journalists have also been turning their gaze towards this whole conspiracy.
So my name's Damien Gale. I'm a reporter at The Guardian, and I've written a series of stories about the plans to introduce age verification for online pornography, and also the concomitant plans to introduce censorship along with age verification.
We asked Damien to tell us a bit more about the MindGeek monopoly.
I mean, the internet kind of runs by monopoly. So Google has the monopoly on search. Facebook essentially has the monopoly on social media. You know, when these companies come into the market, unless there is something, this is some kind of antitrust rules going on that are forcing them to give space to competitors. I mean, that also touched on another point, which I think is really important as well, is that like basically it fixes your identity to your online presence.
Just something that I would like to discuss is like the data collection that they're going to have, like this pool of information. Like what could they possibly do with it? What are they going to do with it soon? Like, I think it's just very interesting. Like they can find out what you're into, and then that can also fear people to watch very boring mainstream, more not boring, but like just very mainstream porn because they're so scared someone might find out that they're into a kink.
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, exactly. Well, as I say, this is going to link our identity to our online presence. It's going to link your identity to your viewing habits. So conceivably, MindGeek now, having fixed your identity to your specific age verification account, can now see exactly what video you're watching. They can track how long you've watched that video for, whether you skipped forward to certain sections, whether you rewound certain sections and watched them again. So they can create a really detailed picture of your taste in pornography. And then that doesn't just work in isolation. And once MindGeek has that information, they don't just have to hold it on their own service for their own use. They can sell it. So they could sell it onto a credit reference agency. They could sell it onto a marketing company and say, I'm sure the rules are that they would have to anonymize that information. But once you've taken, you can take the names off information, but then you can easily re-identify that information by cross-referencing it against other data sets. So they can already build up a really massively detailed picture of our lives through the data that they already hold. Now, if you can add pornography to that data as well, then you're building up a really intimate picture. And so people are very private about what their desires are a lot of the time, and a lot of the time for good reason. The private sector are doing it because they know if they can build up a really detailed picture of what I like, they can show me, say they're trying to sell me something, they can show me an advert with like the right coloured woman with the right height, with the right clothes on or lack of clothes on, like specifically tailored to the consumer, so that they can actually kind of get inside your head, and that's the really frightening thing. Their first imperative is not to secure your data. Their first imperative is to make money.
This is insane.
Yeah, you guys, I don't want people to know how long it takes me to masturbate. It's like when Facebook came in and we were suddenly like, oh no, now our employers are going to be able to see our personal lives. What can employers do now? They're going to be like, oh, she spends a long time masturbating. She's not going to be a very good employee.
What if they don't hire me because I'm kinky? That would be terrible.
Oh, don't worry, babes. Like, kink will be out of your porn panorama. So no more kink for you.
But again, what Damien says about how they can get inside your head.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's much bigger than...
And soon I will start thinking so mainstream so that people can get out of my head. Do you know what I mean? As in that idea?
It's scary, isn't it? I think...
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like, oh my god, we're in the future now. This is happening, you know? The worst, like, science fiction, like, dystopian nightmares, like, that is happening now.
Yeah, this is the thing when people are like, oh, I'm not influenced by this kind of thing because I don't really watch adverts or blah, blah, blah. It's happening so prior to their awareness of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, all of the stuff that you're seeing is being coded to sort of what you're expecting, and you're not even aware that any of this is going on.
And that's a hilarious thing, that people are blaming pornography for, like, society's illnesses and, like, sexism and blah, blah. But actually, advertising, right, that is happening. They're getting into your mind and you're not even noticing. And that is where normative, like, ideals are being, like, you know, unconsciously or subconsciously, like, put into your head.
Yeah, and because people are scared about, like, discussing porn, and because porn is supposed to be something that you have to be ashamed of, like, no one is really noticing that all these things are happening right now. So they're just gonna introduce them, and they won't even notice that all of this is being collected.
Sex is a very honest, I think, a very honest industry. But then you put advertising in the mix and it just becomes like this whole lie. And I really wonder if we're going to be able to stop this. Do you know, are we going to be able to...
Well, it feels like, you know, for centuries now, like, say, biggest institutions of control, like the state and religion, have controlled people through fear and sex, right? Mm-hmm. And now, like, giving all this sex data to these major corporations is like, you know, yeah, the dream of, like, what all these, like, control states would have, you know, loved.
Just not just, like, create fear. Just it's time to sell that fear. But wait, what are then the consequences for small businesses once there is a monopoly on the age verification system from a company like MindGig?
Well, it's interesting. The way that the age verification thing works is, as a consumer, you don't pay for age verification. The website that you're accessing pays for you to be age verified. Yeah. So it means, for example, if you're running a small niche website catering to a particular kind of kink, then every time someone comes to visit your website, you have to pay MindGeek 25 pence or something like that. Now, that's difficult enough as it is. You know, you might not be making a lot of money. You might, just, as you say, be doing what you're doing because it's your passion and it's because your hobby and you're trying to make your hobby, part of your livelihood and your life. But even worse, what MindGeek could conceivably do is they could cause a rush of traffic to your website if they feel like it. You know, they could put a link somewhere on their website saying, go and look at this. And then suddenly you get 10,000 visitors. And each time you get a visitor, and they're accessing your site through MindGeek's token, you have to give MindGeek 25p. And then suddenly, MindGeek has bankrupted you.
Okay, so why is the government even assigning this important role to the private sector? Are they stupid or what?
Well, the government don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they're really reliant on the private sector to tell them how to implement this law. Well, they're giving it to the private sector because that's the ideology of our government. You know, like anything that they want, any service ought to be provided by the private sector. That's the Tory conservative ideology. So, while we could have a state-run age verification process, they would never do that because they're all about shrinking the state anyway.
The job of regulating pornography in the UK is firmly in the hands of the BBFC. Oh, the big black fat cock? What is going on?
God. The British Board of Film Classification.
Oh, okay then. But they're still negotiating exactly how it's going to work, like with Brexit, so that'll be a while. Mm-hmm. The UK seemed to change everything and work out how to do it later.
That doesn't really work.
No, okay. Like Brexit, boom. And so the law change has now been put back from April this year to the end of this year. Is this a good sign? If and when the age verification system does come into play, is there any chance that it may be a good thing? let's go back to the industry veterans to talk about this.
Do you see any positive perspective, like how this thing that we could, like how this could have a better outcome, or is it looking very, very bad?
Well, I mean, with the UK, there's always the chance they just won't enforce it. So, there's a bit of a history of them making really broad, bad laws where it could be interpreted in this incredibly totalitarian way, and then they just don't really have funding and they don't really have time, and so they don't enforce it until they want to get you, and then they've got a legal justification for getting you.
So, it's interesting. You never know which way these things are going to go. Like, on one hand, obviously that's very worrying about, how we're just constantly trying to collect all these data on people. But on the other hand, since free porn has hurt us so much as an industry, I wonder if creating an environment where you're forced because if you're going to buy porn, you have to share your personal information, right? Anyhow, because you have to put your credit card in. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that might have a positive impact on the adult industry, where people might actually have to start paying for it. As opposed to everybody just being able to get online and watch it free, and kids being able to get online and watch it for free.
I am strangely optimistic that it will have a positive effect. I think that it will naturally disperse a lot of the traffic that is dominated by the tube sites. Because I think people have been used to getting their fix for free for so long with no strings attached. Suddenly they'll have to do something. And I think that a lot of people will say, I have to do something. I have to put my ID in. Oh, my God. I have to pay something. Oh, okay. And that's when I think that a percentage, not necessarily a big percentage, but we're talking about a percentage of millions of people here, so it'll be sufficient. We'll say, well, I know these guys have been existing for 15 years, the site's been there, the address is at the bottom, that's fine. And then these guys, I don't really know them, but I don't know who they are, where they are, I don't know what they do, and now that I think they want my details, I don't know how I feel about that. I think that's naturally when they will go to other sites, especially if they have to pay or do something. So that's the first thing. I think we talked about this earlier, but I think possibly it might push a lot of consumers offline. And we could see a reinvigoration of DVD. We could see TV channels increasing the soft market suddenly. So I think that could have a positive ripple effect. And ultimately, I think the tube sites stand to lose the most. Enough to go under? Probably not, unfortunately. But enough to just slightly rebalance things. The thing about the tube sites, which is good for us, is because when you go on a tube site, you can find all sorts of things on there. And I think when we educate consumers that actually, this is the reason why we're doing this, and there's a lot of content on here that is unsubstantiated, and we don't know the origin of it, we don't know if the performance got paid in it, that then becomes harder for the tube sites to say, we're playing ball, we're on side, we get it, because actually there's so much content on there that does not conform to that. Whereas if you go on one of our sites, it'll be very transparent. This is who we are, this is how we operate, these are the performers we work with.
Has having kids changed the way that you make pornography, your approach to pornography?
Since I have had children, I have not changed anything I do about the way we make pornography. It's just crystallised why I do what I do, and we do it the way we do it. I was very clear on the performers would just be treated the way I treat my friends, with respect. There'd be a good vibe on set, because quite simply, if you do that, then there's a good chance they're going to have a good time. So then what happens? Well, then the sex looks great because they feel comfortable and they're having a nice time. And what else happens? They come back. Maybe they talk about the positive experience they had. As opposed to, I'm going to get you down on price, I'm going to make you do things that maybe you didn't know I was going to ask you to do, yada, 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 yada. And so, anyway, so that was very clear. And if I ran a cheese shop, I would run my cheese shop in exactly the same way.
Well, the question would be, like, actually, what websites are going to be affected by this? Like, because is it going to be, like, UK-based companies, or is it, like what is it going to be?
It's everyone who could be viewed by anyone in the UK. So if you like geo-block UK IP addresses and make it so your site isn't visible in the UK, you're kind of blocked yourself, which means they can't sanction you and then they can't do anything. But yeah, if your site is accessible by UK people, you have to comply, which is just bizarre. Like, the UK regulator has no international jurisdiction. So the first thing they do is they notify you and they give you a chance to comply. And if you comply, that's cool. And then if you don't, the next thing they do is if you've got any payment processing, like Veritel, CC Bill, or if you've got any advertisers, so basically the ways that you get paid, they contact those people and they say, this site is illegal and would you withdraw your services? So they can like cut off your income flow. And if that doesn't work, then they instruct the UK ISPs to block your site so it can't be viewed by anyone in the UK. And they can also like take you to court in the UK if you're in the UK. But if you're an international site, they can't do that. The BBFC, the regulator, have said that they are only going to enforce like against the most visited sites first because they've got a small team. So for small indie queer sites worried about this, I would be like, think about what you'll do if you have to. Like, be prepared to implement it on like 3 weeks' notice. Make a plan. But I wouldn't do it until they come asking you to, because they're going to be worrying about the tube sites. You know, that's when mostly kids are looking at porn. And so until they send you a notification and say, please comply, and then you can be like, oh, yes, of course, you know. Gosh, yes, I was just about to get around to it. I wouldn't, like, go to any expense because you might sail under the radar.
Are they really going to do that? Like, are they not going to care? I mean, and also, how are they going to deal with all these websites that are not complying? Like, is the BBFC's plan to, like, first deal with the 50 most popular sites and then Pornhub and such? And then what are they going to do with everyone else? Like, they're going to send a polite email.
Hi, XXX.com. Just following up. How's your mom, by the way? Was that really your mom? Anyway, about all the, problematic content. I'm writing this message to make you aware we have received notice of excessive noise coming from your website. I would like to remind you of our house rules, which don't allow for expensive pleasure or comfort with your body parts or inordinate noise at any time. We understand if the noise and subject was unintentional, but we ask that you comply to our policies and respect your neighbors. If the current noise levels continue, further action will be taken. Thank you, and please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or concerns.
So jokes apart, actually, this could be much, much worse. Like, there's people that have been arguing that possibly the BBFC or the government could just basically block all the websites that they consider to have pornographic content. And that would be a level of censorship that's unprecedented for a democratic country. You know, like, block them all first, ask later. What we did is we did ask the BBFC, and after a couple of emails, we got actually an answer. We asked, we've heard that the 50 most visited sites will be addressed initially in enforcing the new regulations. Is that correct? What will happen to other websites at that point? Will they be blocked?
We will take a proportionate approach and focus on these services known to be visited by children in the UK. 70% of UK traffic to online pornography services goes to the top 50 websites. By focusing on the biggest sites, we maximize our impact in terms of preventing very young children stumbling across pornography. However, The new regulation applies to all online commercial pornography providers. Compliance checks will be carried out in a proportionate and pragmatic way, starting with the highest traffic sites. No commercial pornography website, regardless of its traffic, is outside of the law.
So they know for sure, like all the children who visit like porn sites on the UK.
Yeah, I find it really weird that they worded it in that way. I guess they're just assuming, right? They're popular websites, so children must be mainly watching those.
Known to be visited by children.
Do you think they're looking at them through the webcam camera?
Oh my god, is that happening?
That's child pornography, surely. That's getting deep, but I'm very cynical about what's going on right now. I apologize.
There's Black Mirror right there happening. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, it seems quite misleading that they worded it in that way. But yeah, what we wanted to know was like, are they just going to straight up block the other websites? And they didn't really give us a straight answer.
It seems like they can't give any direct answer. It seems like they don't really know what they're doing and they don't really know how they're going to do it.
I don't even think BBFC know how to have the capacity or manpower to do this.
Exactly, and that is one thing that we also ask. Like, are they manually gonna have a person going through all the 40 million pornographic websites online and like be like, oh yeah, this is, oh no, that is fine, no, that's, you know what I mean? And they, again, did not give us a straight answer.
Yeah, they were just like, technology is going to be utilised. And then the reason we asked that question was because when stuff like this is automated, it means that, like, chances are more random stuff is going to get blocked. Like, something that they think is pornography or, you know, that could just be
algorithm thinks it's pornography.
It's got to be the precedent for doing whatever they want.
But maybe educational sites will also be blocked.
Yeah, all kinds
absolutely.
of things.
It has happened already. And we'll get to that very soon.
Part 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Miles Jackman has described pornography as the canary in the coal mine of free speech, meaning it is the first freedom to go and other freedoms will follow. So when governments start to try and control what people can and can't see by blocking sites and apps, it starts to sound a lot like, take a guess, China, whose Great Firewall is considered the largest, most advanced internet censorship regime in the world. So say, for example, in undemocratic China, you can't use WhatsApp, Facebook, Google or Twitter. So just how close is the UK getting to having their own Great British Firewall?
Take back control of our money, our borders and our laws.
Wait, she's talking about taking back control. So when did they lose control?
So the UK has always been a lot more pro-censorship than other countries in Europe. If you go back 100 years, there was literary censorship. So Ulysses by James Joyce, for example, had a couple of references to sex in it. And so that initially, when it came out, was censored. You had other books, The Well of Loneliness, which was a kind of lesbian classic from the early part of the 20th century. And that was deemed to be, you know, not suitable for general audiences. But the interesting thing about it was that whilst they would block things for general audiences and for general sale, if you were wealthy enough, then you could get these things privately published, or you could buy a copy of a book that had been privately published and, you know, pay over the odds for it. But it's kind of part of that whole British kind of conception of paternalistic kind of, you know, what's fine for the ruling classes and for the rich men, what they can handle is you know, it's not okay for poorer people because it might corrupt their morals. You know, there's I think the Obscenity Act, which is from the mid 19th century, they laid the test of obscenity as having a tendency to corrupt or deprave. So what you found around that time is a lot of these books would get imported from France, and customs would always be on the lookout for books that were being imported, and they'd open them up and they'd pulp hundreds and hundreds of books as they came into the country. They'd have kind of inspectors going around bookshops, making sure that there were no obscene books on sale, and eventually it kind of it reached a point where it became socially unviable anymore because they found that they were trying to bring prosecutions under the Obscenity Acts and juries wouldn't convict. After that, there was a liberalisation. Then when video came in, Obviously, they introduced a new era of pornography. Pornographic videos, obviously, are different. Yeah, but yeah. So what they did then is they had the British Board of Film Classification, and they brought in a new regime of censorship along with that. So they had you obviously have the age classifications of 18, 15, 12, PG, U. But they brought in a special classification for pornography, which is R18, restricted 18. So these were pornographic videos that you could only buy in registered sex shops. Now, even these, though, the R18 classification, you would be able to see, for example, intercourse, be able to see erect penises, but there were certain things which they felt were beyond the pale. So anything really to do with S&M, bizarrely female ejaculation, because they haven't ever managed to work out what female ejaculation is to their satisfaction. And the reasoning behind that is they think it's wee. So and for them, you know, weeing on someone is unhealthy, and therefore people shouldn't be doing it, and therefore videos shouldn't be showing it because it might encourage people to do it. So they banned that.
Okay, so the UK has an interesting tendency to be over-paternalizing their citizens, and especially when it comes to sexual expression. But why is this happening right now?
It would seem that as we are in a time of economic underperformance, to say the least, and the spectre of war on the horizon, the collapse of the NHS in this country and various other social ills like poverty, homelessness and so on. So striking out against sexuality is always a very cheap way of distracting people from the more pressing social concerns.
Okay, so we have a government creating a moral panic around sex and pornography in order to distract attention from other social issues. You know, they're creating a law that is going to allow them to have the unprecedented censorship control in a democratic country. Does this ring a bell? Some other people that are also concerned think that there might be more to this law change than just, protecting the children. We've been exploring the different consequences this might have, but let's look at the wider picture, shall we? What is really the political agenda of the UK? We talked to the author of the book Porn Panic, Jerry Barnett, who also describes himself as a free speech activist, entrepreneur, aging raver, and geek. We met up with him on a hazy Monday morning and talked about the good old days of underground raves and talked a bit about his book, Porn Panic, a polemic on the moralizing anti-porn movement.
I'm Jerry Barnett. I'm the author of Porn Panic. I'm a technologist by background, but I also worked with the online porn industry from the mid-90s till about 2012. I ran my own site. And via that, I got involved in sexual freedom causes and, in particular, in the issue of censorship. So I see the porn panic and the clampdown on pornography and a lot of other trends that are happening at the moment as kind of signals of fascism. And I think certainly fascist and dictatorial regimes always clamp down on sexual freedom because, if you clamp down on sex and drugs, you have control over a lot of the population, so it's a way to control social behaviours and so on. And the British press is particularly good at this, but there'll be a child murder and they'll say, and porn was found on his home computer.
So basically, once again, Jerry believes that sexual freedom and political freedom go hand in hand, and that sexual freedom is the first thing the government will attack in order to get the system in place for further restriction. The canary in the coal mine and so on. This is why they're giving the responsibility of enforcing the law to the BBFC, which is the British Board of Film Classification, the institution officially taking care of censorship in the UK for the last century.
Censors always get a lot of power, that's why they're the censor.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I agree. The thing is, age verification isn't just about adult content in terms of pornography, but also other things that adults might engage in, like alcohol and tobacco. But there are further categories of things that are being prohibited, like the so-called pro-anorexia websites, which, much as I understand them, are resources created for people with eating disorders to be able to talk to each other. So in free speech terms, the notion that these websites are pro-anorexia is arguable, but in free speech terms, there's a blocking power which would stop younger people talking to each other about their health concerns. That's got to be very concerning. And the final category of material which can be prohibited is simply called esoteric material. In other words, material we don't like. So, anything slightly unusual, whether it's Rick and Morty or Monty Python, could theoretically be blocked under those terms. So in terms of the infringement on free speech, it is absolutely colossal and unprecedented. So in other words, it's likely to be a device to regulate human behaviour that the government find convenient and can be pitched as a universal panacea type solution.
And as it was at the time, you would have to bring in this censorship. And the penalty was, if you didn't bring this in, you would be blocked. So obviously it raised the spectre that the UK would have a Chinese-style Great Firewall, essentially blocking great swathes of the internet, because most of the internet is porn, from viewers in the UK. And once you have a system of censorship set up for one particular area, it's then very easy to turn it around and target anything else that you want, whether that's political thought or...
Yes.
Okay, guys, I think we are not putting enough emphasis in what's happening here. We're talking about the British Great Firewall.
Yeah.
This is real.
Yeah, I mean, like Damien says, once you put this system in place and the governments can just decide, actually, we don't like this. Mm-hmm. This is porn. This goes against what we think society should be.
And they will be free just to invent as many moral panics as they wish on as many issues as they wish and just keep going from there. And of course, they're starting with porn and sex workers because nobody cares about us, basically.
We are the gateway porn, the gateway of the internet. The marijuana is the gateway drug. We are the gateway for censorship. It is. Let's attack porn, and then now we're going to slowly slap.
I mean, we are literally talking about the gateway for censorship, also with the age verification gateway. Yeah. So that does work.
Oh my god.
We're all surprised.
So this is under the Digital Economy Act, and any website that refuses to have age verification before its homepage could be blocked by UK ISPs. In other words, the BBFC have the power to compel British service providers not to host those websites. Now, this blocking power is incredibly dangerous. As a precedent, it's up there with Chinese democracy because it's creating the Great British Firewall, or Hadrian's Firewall as it's been called, to stop, shall we say, unpleasant foreign interests from percolating to our perfect shores. And that, yet again, in the current debate around immigration, seems to be conflated, this idea of foreign sexuality penetrating our sceptred isle. And for those reasons, it's actually creating a tacit trade war, saying to the Americans, for example, right, you can't host these, your sites in our country unless you have age verification. There's a very complicated legal question as to whether this is even enforceable at law. So, given the sort of whole Brexit scenario of Parliament trying to land grab power, this is arguably an example of that. People who don't know what they're doing, who don't understand the consequences of what they're doing, thinking, well, we've got to stop it somehow. And blocking is the way that they have come up with to prohibit it.
That sounds a lot like porn sit. Like all this like xenophobic arguments and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Keep your dirty porn away from my border.
Yeah, keep your dirty immigrants and your dirty porn away from us white people. Great. No, sorry, vetoed that. That's not very nice.
It's weird because it's sort of like concealed behind prejudice, which feels like a bad thing to hide anything behind, but like it feels like it's probably more financial motives. I don't know, is it more xenophobia or is it more them just trying to like actually have control over their own economy?
I think it's a bit of everything. I think it's a bit of everything.
If you add those two, like one and one together, you have fascism, don't you?
Yeah. It's all conflated. Anyway, isn't like this Brexit move on our porn unlawful in any case?
But arguably at this moment in time, yes, there would be recourse to Europe to look at these laws and decide whether or not they are actually technically enforceable, whether they're good law, or whether the powers that have been granted are ultra-vires and therefore unlawful.
That's crazy. Okay, but who are going to be the first people targeted? Like, not talking about the porn industry now, but about the civilians. Like, what is there anyone that is being excluded through this law?
So people who are, from the user end, I think people who are queer, who are trans, who are in vulnerable housing situations, who have a lot to lose from being outed and who are maybe not experiencing support and understanding amongst the people in their lives, still have the most to lose from having their privacy violated. And not to mention the fact that if you're a survivor of domestic violence, right, or like you are homeless, you don't have proof of address, like you can't get a credit card or a passport. Like if you're poor, you can't afford £80 for a passport. If you're disabled, like you can't drive, you don't have a driving license. Like it's ableist, it's classist, it's anti-poor, it's anti-migrant.
So it all seems to point out to the fact that many people will be excluded by this, but we still don't know the extent of it, you know?
Okay, so we're, looking towards a really worst case scenario here in the UK, but what is the consequences for the rest of the world?
Their ultimate goal is they feel that the UK is such an important market online, is that when the UK brings in age verification, what it will do is it will show the rest of the world that it's possible, and show the rest of the world that essentially, if the UK can bring in age verification and make it work, then they can as well. So I asked him, what about people using VPNs? And he said, well, that might work initially, for the first couple of years, but eventually what they'll find is that jurisdictions will eventually just fall into line. So you might be able to VPN your way to Switzerland, but then Switzerland might bring in age verification and follow the UK. Same with Germany, same with Spain, until eventually you won't be able to VPN to anywhere except, I don't know, maybe Kazakhstan or somewhere like that. I don't know, some really kind of random kind of unknown place, and then by that time the speed of your connection will be so slow that it just won't be worth it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's their ultimate goal. That's their strategic goal that they want to see, and they think that if they can show how it works in the UK, then the Americans probably will follow suit first.
And that would be the end of the internet as we all know it. That was the first part of the Earthsys podcast episode, The Conservative Manifesto, the Great British Firewall. So now we have a better understanding of what pornography has to do with censorship. But how did society come to think this way? How does the rest of the world look upon pornography and sex work? Why are some sex acts okay and others are not? What is pornography? Just something to wank to? Or more than that? Why are we so scared to talk about sex to our kids? All of this and more on part 2 of The Conservative Manifesto. Porn will tear us apart.